The Electric Eel. In 2019, researchers testing wild populations in the Amazon found one that could produce 860 volts, the strongest electric discharge ever measured in a living animal, more than 5 times what comes out of a household outlet in the United States. That discovery was big enough to split what everyone had assumed was a single species into 3. Most people know this fish as electric. Fewer know it isn't actually an eel at all. It belongs to a completely different order of fish, more closely related to catfish than to any of the true eels later in this list, and its long, eel-like body is closer to a coincidence of evolution than a family resemblance. The voltage itself isn't the only interesting part. Electric eels use low-voltage pulses to navigate murky water, almost like sonar, then switch to high-voltage bursts to stun prey or drive off threats. Biologist Kenneth Catania documented something stranger than either. When something partly out of the water threatens it, the eel doesn't just discharge from below. It rises and presses its chin against the target, concentrating the shock directly into it instead of letting the current disperse through the water. The naturalist Alexander von Humboldt described exactly this in 1800, watching Venezuelan fishermen drive horses and mules into a pool to draw the eel's charge before the exhausted animals could be caught by hand. An account long treated as exaggerated travel writing until later expeditions confirmed the same technique was still in use. And despite spending their entire lives submerged, electric eels are obligate air breathers. Their gills can't supply enough oxygen alone, so they surface every 10 minutes or so just to gulp air. Of the 3 species identified in that 2019 split, the one capable of 860 volts was named Electrophorus voltae, after the physicist whose battery it was, unintentionally, built to outperform. The Viper Moray. Its teeth don't fit inside its mouth. Long, curved, and needle-thin, they jut out even when the jaw is fully closed, which is how the species got its name. Enchelinassa canina turns up across the Indo-Pacific and into parts of the Atlantic, wedged into reef crevices where it's rarely seen and even more rarely studied. Unlike the giant moray or the green moray, both regulars in dive footage and aquarium tanks, the Viper Moray has stayed mostly out of the scientific record. There's no solid population estimate, no detailed study of how it hunts, just scattered sightings and photographs of that unmistakable mouth. What is understood is what the teeth are for. They're built for grip, not for cutting. Once something is caught between them, escape is nearly impossible. The recurved shape works like a fishhook, pulling prey deeper in with every attempt to pull away. Divers who do encounter one rarely describe aggression. The Viper Moray tends to retreat into its crevice at the first sign of a threat, teeth and all, which may be the real reason it stays so poorly documented. A predator this well-armed has little reason to test that armor against anything its own size. The Green Moray. It isn't green. Underneath, its skin is a dull blue-grey, but a thick coat of yellow mucus covers the body, and the 2 colors combine into the shade divers recognize instantly. That mucus isn't cosmetic. It protects the eel's skin from parasites and pathogens in the reef water where it spends most of its life, coiled into holes along the coasts of the Western Atlantic and the Caribbean. Green morays can grow past 8 feet, and in parts of the Caribbean they've grown so used to divers that they're often ranked among the more approachable large predators on a reef. Approachable isn't the same as harmless. There's no venom involved, but the jaw pressure and recurved teeth mean a defensive bite can do real damage, and most recorded injuries don't happen during an attack. They happen during hand feeding, when a moray strikes at sudden movement instead of the food it was offered. The Slender Giant Moray. Fully extended, Strophodon sathete can reach close to 13 feet, longer than any other moray eel on record. Including the giant moray it's often confused with by name alone. That's where the resemblance ends. The giant moray is thick-bodied and reef-bound. The slender giant is built almost like a sea snake, narrow enough that its true length is easy to underestimate until it's stretched out in the open. It also lives somewhere most morays avoid, estuaries and mangrove flats across the Indo-Pacific, murky and brackish rather than clear and coral-lined. That habitat keeps it out of sight of most divers and out of most reef documentaries, which is likely why a species holding a length record remains one almost nobody has heard of. Hunting through silt and low visibility It relies far more on smell than sight to find fish and crustaceans buried in the mud, a very different toolkit from its reef-dwelling relatives, built for a habitat none of them would tolerate, the giant moray. By mass, this is the heaviest of all moray species, with individuals recorded past 6 feet and 30 kilograms, patrolling reefs from the Red Sea to the Central Pacific. Its hunting method solves a problem every predator with a flexible, boneless-looking body runs into. Once you've clamped down on something, how do you swallow it without a mouth built for chewing? The giant moray's answer, described by biologist Rita Mehta in 2007, is a second set of jaws. Positioned in the throat, these pharyngeal jaws shoot forward into the mouth, grab the prey a second time, and drag it down, a feeding mechanism found almost nowhere else among vertebrates. The species has also been observed doing something very few fish manage at all. Researchers in the Red Sea documented giant morays hunting in coordination with roving coral groupers, the grouper signalling toward hidden prey with a shake of its head. The eel flushing fish out of crevices the grouper's body is too wide to reach. Both species benefit, neither is related to the other. It's one of the only confirmed cases of two unrelated fish species hunting as a team. Most bite injuries involving giant morays trace back not to hunting or defense, but to hand feeding by tourists and fishers. And there's a second, quite a risk attached to the species. Giant moray flesh can accumulate ciguatera toxin from the reef food chain, making the eel itself dangerous to eat even when it poses no threat alive. The Conger Eel. A European conger caught off the coast of England in 1995 weighed just over 133 pounds, a record that still stands, and one that puts the species ahead of every other eel on this list by sheer mass. Congers spend most of their lives wedged into rock crevices and shipwrecks along the Atlantic coast and through the Mediterranean, only coming out to hunt after dark, which is part of why an animal this large stays this unfamiliar to most people. The other reason has to do with what happens once they reach adulthood. Like several other eel species, congers are semelparous. They breed once, in deep water far from the coastline they spent their lives on, and then they die. For a long time, no one had ever found a conger egg or larva close enough to shore to confirm exactly where that final migration ends. The evidence pointing toward deep water in the eastern Atlantic came from tagging studies and genetics, rather than a direct sighting. Anglers who hook a conger tend to describe it less as dangerous and more as difficult. A caught eel will wrap its body around anything within reach, boat gear included, and its bite carries enough force that fishing guides in the UK routinely warn against handling one by the head.